Hello everyone and welcome to class. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Brentan and today we're doing a learning focused class all about our knee joint. So no movement required for you today. You can choose to get comfy on a chair, you can sit down on the floor with me and kind of explore as we go through things if you're that type of learner, whatever really floats your boat. So we just finished talking about our feet and our ankles, doing some mobility exercises there. So if we want to start talking about the structure of the knee, maybe it makes sense to kind of start from where we left off. So we were talking about how our foreleg has two bones in it. The big one is the tibia that runs on the inside, and like when you're feeling the top of your shin, that's the bone that you're feeling. And then off to the side on the outside, you have the little fibula, and that kind of like glues on to the bigger bone. And at the bottom, it creates the ankle. The knobby bones on both sides are each one of those bones. And then as it goes up, the smaller bone kind of glues into the bigger bone. And now the tibia is what creates the bottom of the knee joint. So just one of those foreleg bones coming up. And that's what makes it really stable, right? So the tibia comes up, and then the thigh bone, the femur bone, comes down from the pelvis and it meets there. They just kind of sit like one on top of the other. And then the upper thigh bone has these kind of two roundy knobs on it, which creates a little pocket for our sweet little kneecap to sit in. So our knee joint is comprised of those three bones, tibia on the foreleg, thigh bone coming down, and then the kneecap that sits on the thigh bone in this little notch that the thigh bone creates, and then the thigh bone comes down, sits right here. Lots of cartilage in there to make it nice and cushy and give it support and allow nice gliding action. Here we're calling it meniscus. So that is one part of the knee that can be particularly vulnerable if we are positioning the knee in sort of like overly compressing the knee with the joint or the bone set in kind of a weird way, and then it can rub on that meniscus. So the way that the knee joint is all held together, the way the bones are held together, is with the ligaments. And so we actually just have 4 ligaments in the knee. We have 2 on the inside that crisscross, and they connect the thigh bone to the shin bone. And so these are the ones. Actually, let me see. Let's talk about all 4 of them, then we can talk about what they do. And then you have ones on the outer knee that go from the outer thigh bone and then down. The inside one attaches to our big tibia bone, and then the outer one attaches to the smaller fibula on the outside. So this one on the outside, its job is to restrict the leg blowing out this way through the knee, right? This one on the inside is designed to not blow the knee out this way. So it's restricting that movement so that either the thigh bone on top or the shin bone underneath aren't allowed to move in that direction, and that's what makes it pretty stable tracking forward, backward. It's then the ones on the inside that cross that keep the bone aligned forward, backward. So all of these are designed to hold the thigh bone and the shin bone on top of each other and allow for predominantly a hinge movement, which is why we call this joint a hinge joint. But there's also some rotation that's possible here, especially when the knee is bent. And so you can actually kind of see, like if you were to fix your pelvis in place and kind of sit how I'm sitting right now and have your heel in front of you, now you're fixing your pelvis so you can fix your thigh bone up to the knee and not have it move. And you can test to see how much rotation you actually have in the knee just by kind of windshield wipering the foot back and forth. So this is fine, this is good, this is normal. The reason why the knee needs to be able to have this rotation in the lower leg bone is because we have so much mobility in our ankle. We can do all of this kind of stuff. And as we'll see as we move up, we have a lot of mobility and range of motion in the hip as well. And so if the knee is kind of sitting in between these two really mobile joints, it needs to have some flexibility to it beyond just like this really strict forward backward. So it's necessary that we have that rotation, but on the other hand, that makes the joint really vulnerable. And so that's why a lot of times our injuries to the knee, whether it's injury of the ligament or of the meniscus or of tendons or of the muscles surrounding the leg, a lot of that has to do with undue rotation of the knee, or if somehow like the bones get misaligned and then there's weight and pressure on that area, either just like from trauma, like blunt force, like if you're a soccer player and you just pivot too quickly on the field, or repetitive over time. If you're just like practicing yoga or doing, something else, and you're starting to feel something in the knee kind of start talking to you like, wow, that's not normal or right. That's the time to intervene and come in and see and look at, what's our patterning down here in terms of like, how are we positioning and activating the areas around our leg? And then how would I rehab that in a smart way to come back to this kind of neutral? So a lot of our knee work then is going to be aimed in that direction, kind of strengthening all this area so that our knee can track in a straight way, and it can kind of absorb any impact that would make it want to rotate too much. So this requires us to have kind of a little bit of an understanding of what neutral is in our body. For most people, so the line of gravity goes along the outside of the leg. That's one difference between us and chimps. Their legs are actually sit on the outside of the pelvis, and their weight-bearing axis goes down the inside, and that's why they're kind of like wobbling around. And then as we evolved to become more able to walk on 2 feet, the legs moved closer together, and now the axis runs down the outside of the leg. And for that reason, we have some little kind of like twists in our bones. Like nothing down here is straight. If we were to imagine like what our bones looked like, there's always like a little curve or a little something as kind of like just little evolutionary reminders of where we came from, which makes it all the more important for us to develop our range of motion and our stability in these areas so we can support all of the intricacies down here. So I think I was talking about something else, but I don't remember, so I'm going to go on. We can talk about the muscles a little bit. So we have the muscles on the front of the leg. Those are the quadriceps. There's 4 of them. Most of them just go from the upper leg and then down over the kneecap. But there's one of them that connects up to the pelvis, and it also goes down to the kneecap. And so they all come together, they thread over the kneecap, and they're actually what stabilizes the kneecap, because then the kneecap can come and it attaches onto the front of the tibia right here. So these are the muscles. If you think of like, remember that muscles pull on bones in order to move them. So if you move 2 ends of the muscle closer together, what movement will that create? Okay, well that will extend the knee joint. The knee joint is fully extended when the leg is straight. Some people have, like hypermobility there, so like it'll be more than straight. So you just want to kind of try to figure out like how your own skeleton is positioned just through, practicing, trial and error, being interested, that kind of stuff. So we have our quadriceps that do that. Then on the back of the leg, we have our hamstring group. They come up from the sitting bones, so on the pelvis. So they don't even attach to the upper thigh bone, they attach to the pelvis. Then they go down the thigh and they kind of split off, because there's 3 of them. They kind of split off and they attach on both sides. They attach on both sides of the lower leg. So these muscles, if you think about 2 ends pulling together, closer together, when the hamstrings contract like that, it flexes the knee and it pulls the heel closer to the pelvis. So we want to have the ability to, if our knee is fully functioning, fully extend our leg when the hip is in different positions, which again, we'll kind of get more into as we move forward, but we'll certainly look at different hip positions just arrangement of the legs to the pelvis, all those different combinations. And our leg, we want to be able to extend our knee when the leg's placed like that. Same is true for bending the leg. And then we'll work on that, we'll develop that, but then we'll also look at the strengthening aspect and the stabilization aspect. So we'll look at the knee's ability to track forward in neutral. That was where I was going, was like the weight-bearing axis going down. And then for most people, our neutral is knee tracking over the second toe. And so that's something we'll start to be able to pay more attention to as we move forward. But we're gonna start to stabilize the knee in a neutral place. And then we're going to develop the stability to absorb kind of different pressures against that arrangement, if that makes sense. So that's kind of what we have in store for us next week. We're gonna do mobility and play around with extension, flexion, those are the basic movements, and then the stabilization component. And then the week following, we'll do a practice that's aimed more at that stabilization component, more at strengthening the knee, having fun in some traditional yoga poses like horse and lunge and all of that kind of stuff. So that's all I have for you today. If you guys have extra questions about the knee, because there's a lot going on, I'm just trying to give you what I think is relevant for the purposes of movement. So feel free to shoot me questions down below. And also, if you want to support these videos, please consider joining us on Patreon. We're over there. We give out all of our resources over there. We do group calls, things like that. It's just a nice way for you to get closer to us and feel like this is actually more of a two-way street rather than me just sitting here talking to my Canon. So thanks so much for joining today, you guys, and I'll see you next week.